am Lynn, my psychic focus, and today I am talking about a topic, and I called it coping with dark and heavy readings. It's not as much a question for a reading, but more a personal question for myself that I thought could benefit others by hearing. So I'll get straight to the question here. It says, I sense that you sometimes spare us many of the darkest or most painful details of the readings you do. I know much of what you see is violent, depressing, and what most of us would call negative. I know that doing readings and using your gifts is not at all new for you, so I was wondering how you have learned to cope with all the negative and heavy information. If you have some advice for us for the times when we find things that are painful or hard for our spirits and our minds to deal with. What is your perspective on this? How do you cope? Do you have any advice for us on how to stay positive or how to work through the things that we are learning without becoming depressed or anxious? I thought this was a really great question that I wanted to tackle. And before I get to my response, please don't forget to go in and hit the like button. I really appreciate it. And that's all I asked, is please go in and hit the like button. It really does help me out. So to answer this question, which is important and a question that a lot of people have, whether it is you thinking about the world, whether it is maybe you meditated on something, maybe you're trying to develop your intuitive gifts, but nonetheless, this is all something that we're faced with of how do you deal with the information that you get, good and bad. So when I'm doing a reading, I do encounter situations that can be difficult. I mean, that's no surprise. If any of you have looked at the blog or looked at different videos on this channel, I have a whole variety of things on there. I've done many readings, and I've had to develop ways to understand and relay information without allowing it to weigh on me after I'm done. Sometimes during a reading, it does very much weigh on me, but I've learned to deal with it when I'm done. It's true that it's much easier said than done, but if something I've worked on, and I continue to work on this process of being able to deal with it because it's important. It's part of development. It's part of growth. It's part of becoming better at what we all do or what we strive to do. So, I mean, first and foremost, environment. It helps a lot. I keep a pretty zen space where I do my readings. I am surrounded by lots of crystals, lots of organite. I sage my area occasionally when I feel like it's heavy and it just needs to be done. Just like you spring clean, you know, your closets, you need to clean your energy space. You need to move and shift that energy. I typically, when I'm doing a reading, hold a clear crystal quartz, but sometimes have a nudge to hold something else. I really like Orlite 23. Sometimes I'm holding amethyst. Most times it's clear crystal quartz. It depends on what I'm being called to. So you may investigate using different crystals or how that resonates with you, or having organite around you. Maybe that feels good. Just basically, you want to create a nice environment to even begin with. Then another important thing to do that I do daily with all of my readings is to set mental protection and say a little mantra to yourself before each reading, regardless of what the topic's going to be, because you honestly don't know what is going to come through. Everything, it can be very surprising. Something you think is going to be positive may have something surprising to you, and regardless, you should just protect yourself. Helps to create boundaries and protect your space for what or who is about to come through. And it can be something as simple as saying, I only allow high vibrational information to come through to me. Only allow things that are in the highest and best good for all parties involved. You can say something that simple, but just have a routine of doing that and creating that space of what you're going to allow to enter your field. You may see it, but it doesn't have to impact you that way. As I tune into bigger topics, because I do a lot of general readings out there, it might be human trade, it could be scandals, politics, beer bug issues. They do evoke negative energy, and I'm not saying that they do not. During the reading, I'm very in tune to what's going on, and empathetic emotions can absolutely be triggered. I am a conduit, but I'm hearing it and I'm feeling it. That's part of doing the reading itself. I work to view these as I'm experiencing them like a movie rather than do it firsthand. And at the end, when the movie is done, I'm done. I've trained myself to do it and approach it from that way. And then when it's over, I have to clear and detach myself. Occasionally, depending on the topic and how emotionally ingrained I get with it, I might have to do a little bit more than that, and it might linger. But once I get an awareness, I just have to detach. I just tell myself that I cannot identify what it is that I'm relaying, and it needs to go. It needs to go to where it's better served. I'm not the one that's going to be able to hold on to it. And sometimes this happens too, that doesn't work and that doesn't make it move, or I can't seem to shift it. Maybe it had to do with children, and I'm a mom. You know, I have certain topics that really get to me more than others. I go outside and go for a walk. I go in my yard, I pet my dog. I do something that is completely unrelated to what I'm doing. I put my mind on something else and I ground myself. I go outside, I take some conscious efforts, I look at the sky, I do things that more resonate with nature or animals. That does it for me. And everybody will have their thing that is their sweet spot that makes them feel better. You might do yoga, you might meditate, you might take a hot bath. Whatever's your thing that helps you release your mind, that's what you have to do. For me, it is nature and it is my pet. So that's how I personally deal with that. And those are some ideas of things that you too can do if you're feeling that things are on you that you can't seem to shake. The most difficult situations that typically will hold a lot of emotion for me are ones with loved ones, especially children. And I had a reading in which someone had a question and they were trying to connect to their mom. And so it was this mother-daughter scenario, and it was just really loving and really touching. And she had questions for her mom, who was in spirit, just trying to get an understanding on her passing away and different things that were going on. And the connection came through so strong, and the mother's message was so heartfelt that she'd had for her daughter, that by the time I was done relaying it, I was in tears just trying to relay that message. So yes, it can be very emotionally tugging, but so beautiful at the same time. So just because it evokes an emotion doesn't mean that it has to be a bad thing. It was actually a very beautiful moment that I felt privileged to be a part of while that was going on. And I mean, I keep in perspective too that even though I'm a conduit for relaying this, I'm still hearing and I'm feeling what's going on as it's being delivered. And then when the reading was over, I was able to take a few breaths and clear myself, because I knew that what I did was what needed to be done. And I took comfort in that, and that allowed everything to move on, and I was able to let that go. It's just really a practice. It's a practice, just like getting into a meditative state is a practice. Clearing yourself after every scenario, that is a practice too. And there's also been times where I've had to relay bad news, and that is also a very difficult situation. And I specifically remember one, and this was a few years ago, that a child was missing, and she was a young lady. She couldn't be located. So the parents reached out to me for help if I had any insight into it. I immediately saw, that she connected with some bad people. She was working at a prostitute in exchange for drugs. It was just a very unfortunate situation. And it was heartbreaking to deliver that type of message. But at the same time, I knew that it had to be done because they found me, and that's what came through. And I'm obligated to say and relay what it is that I hear without me putting my fingerprints and changing it. They needed to hear it, and that's the way that the universe connected us. So I delivered this message, and at the end of the reading, I took a few breaths, and I knew that everything that happened had to have happened in the greater good, and I just had to let that go and know that everything was working in the greater good, and that the parents needed to know this. And at the end, it proved to be true, because the parents, they came back to me, and it was truly a blessing, because I was able to give them enough information that they retrieved their daughter and that got her into rehab, and maybe my reading saved her life. So everything works in the greater good, and knowing that too, that is also a way that I help myself relieve myself of any kind of heavy or dark emotions that I may encounter during a reading and relaying sometimes very uncomfortable or negative information to other people. And basically, all in all, I've learned to trust what comes through and just relay it. Just be honest. That's all you can really do. It might be dark, it might be heavy. If it's too much or if it's not right to share, I intuitively know that. I will, sometimes information fades out, or sometimes I just get stumped. And one time I was doing a reading and I was communicating with an ET. And when he looked at me and he goes, and he told me to shush. So I knew then. So I just pay attention and I listen and I observe and I do what I'm guided to do. I just have to know that it is truly in the greater good. And when I'm done, I have to let go and visually detach from what it was that I was doing. Sometimes easier said than done, but it does become a little easier with time. And I've had a lot of practice and I continue to practice. Again, I'm not perfect, so I'm going through this too. I just have to be mindful and conscious of what I'm doing. And that is all I have. I hope that that gave some help to someone or many people that are going through this right now, trying to understand it, maybe doing some developing or just trying to do some self-analysis on how to better cope with the information that they have going on, either intuitively or just dealing with the physical world around them, of how to let go of stuff and not own what is happening. So I will leave you with that. Again, please go in and like my video. Don't forget to share my channel and put a comment. It does help. Again, I'm Lynn with Psychic Focus at psychicfocus.blogspot.com. Thank you. Bye.